was a long, hard winter. We started rationing our food almost immediately, and even then, it was hard. Firewood didn't last long, so we had to get creative just to keep warm. Turns out hellfire heated stones are good for warming a space, even if the heat doesn't spread far. It's terrible for cooking, though. Every few days, 2 of us would go through the process again, each time a different pair with a different result. I don't know if it helped anything in the grand scheme of things, but it helped stave off the boredom, so we did it. We also told stories, and when we ran out of ones to tell, we made up new ones, building off each other. Other days we were silent. The best I can estimate is we spent a month, maybe 2. It's hard to keep track of, but we were trapped inside until the storm let up and the snow melted enough for us to be able to travel again. And we started the long journey back home, retracing our steps until we found the hermit's old abode. From there, we wandered until we found signs of civilization.
If we hadn't become the peacekeepers, we probably would have died that winter, frozen or starved to death. That was one of the hardest winters I've ever experienced in more ways than one.
It certainly gave perspective on what the rest of our lives would look like. Sometimes that room felt like it was shrinking. But we found ways to not drive each other insane.
It was hope that drove us to return instead of disappearing into obscurity. After spending months inside, being out on the road felt so good. It was like wandering into a whole new world, and so we wandered, not knowing where we would find people, much less signs that what we did worked.
And we didn't get very far until we ran into something surprising.
Indeed. The group Sam had infiltrated before we found the lab were nearly caught by a Fae scouting group, and they ended up fleeing into the lab for shelter. There was a brief siege before a surprise blizzard forced the Fae to take shelter inside as well. We think that was around when James and I did our first pass through the trial. It was a very tense winter for them, but they made it through without any bloodshed, and some of them even began to trust each other. By the time it was safe for them to leave, they realized something had changed. And when we found them just outside the lab and they weren't slaughtering each other, we decided to approach. Sam considered donning his disguise again, but we decided that would increase his likelihood of getting shot or stabbed, so he didn't. It took a while to get through the story and convince them that we were telling the truth, but eventually they agreed to come with us. We took them back to the building, and the first 2 volunteers went through the trial. When they came out all right, the next pair went, and then the next pair. By the time the whole group had gone through, they had both sent runners to other camps they knew of to tell them to come as well.
By then, other groups began to show up, so we told them what we learned and sent them through. People began writing down our story, sending it out with the word to come and experience this new thing. It was slow at first, but soon half the military had gone through on both sides. We brought in others to help oversee things so we could get a break. The story we had discovered was circulated far and wide, and before we knew it, the war was over. When we heard that the rulers of both kingdoms would be coming to experience the process, we could hardly believe it. The grudge that had started this all had been passed down through the generations, being twisted with each telling to become so ingrained that we knew it would take more than one trial for it to be eroded. Perhaps many trials over many generations. But once we saw the kings go in, and hours later exit through the central door, we knew everything would be okay.
We left that night. Our work was done, and I, for one, had no interest in sticking around to rub shoulders with those in power. The truth of what started the war had spread far enough we knew it would never be lost again.
And if it ever was, we knew we would be here to bring it back. We went into this with open eyes, knowing all it would entail, and so here we will remain until the end of the age, until the peace is broken. After that, I'm not sure what will happen, and honestly, I don't care. I wouldn't exchange this for anything. You have been listening to Ceasefire, the story of the end of a war that did not end the world. This story was written and produced by Brianna Jean as part of Pseudonym Social, a creative podcast network changing reality one story at a time. In this episode, you can hear the voices of Brianna Jean as Vivian, Zadkiel Vasky Huff as Sam, David Telstra as James. You can support all of our productions over at patreon.com/pseudonymsocial. To get more information on this or any of our other shows, check out our website at pseudonymsocial.com.